What's up guys, welcome to Vintage Genetics, where it is all about classic bodybuilding. And I do say classic bodybuilding, but back in the days it did not have this technique. You might be wondering, what is this? Well, these are occlusion cuffs, aka blood flow restriction cuffs. So basically what they do, you wrap them around your arm and then you get a great pump in the arm, but the blood can only go in but cannot go back out. And creating a pump, or the swelling of the muscle cells, is actually one of the factors of muscle growth. So whenever you're doing an exercise and you can't really hold the pump that well, but you do want to increase the muscle size of a weak muscle group, this is a great way to do so. It also lowers the amount of weight you need to do, so any stress on the joints is lessened. And if you do this as the first exercise, every other exercise afterwards is going to be more difficult, allowing you to have to use less weight for the same effect. And I'm actually using pretty much a high-tech way of pumping these up. So normally it's literally bands, you wrap them around your arm. The tightness can't really be regulated consistently, but with this it's by air. So you literally blow it up here, put in some air until it says a number that you want to see every single time. You know the tightness, you know how tight it is, and then you can use it every single time on the same amount of blood flow restriction. So let's first get started on an isolation movement for the triceps, because it's an arm day and the weak points of the arms are the triceps. So let's do it. Alright, so as I mentioned, this is very different from what I usually do. And to start off, no, this is not a sponsored video or anything like that. I got these occlusion cuffs from my girlfriend for my birthday. And that's because I already had occlusion cuffs or wraps, but I really didn't like them. They didn't sit well. They kind of were irritating my skin. So I've been using this for a while, but I wasn't really able to do it consistently because I didn't have nice ones or comfortable ones. So these work by air. So as I mentioned, you fill them up with air and then they tighten up around your arm or legs. And then they pretty much keep the blood in the arm or the leg where you want it. So you can imagine when I'm right here during this rope pushdown, you can see my arm is literally being a different color from the amount of blood in there, and the pump you feel is quite incredible. Now, I don't advise people to put this very tightly when they are inexperienced. You should know what you should feel. So I know what a good pump feels like. I know what it should feel like if it feels wrong. So you don't want to feel any numbness, any tingling, any pain, basically. So the only thing I feel is tightness and pumpness in the arm, and discoloration can occur like here. Some people say, well, if you get that, then you should put them less tight, but I don't know exactly how tight I should put it for the maximum results with minimum risk. Anyway, so why am I doing this in the first place? To make a long story short, I happened to have some injury. Not really an injury, but irritation of the bicep tendon on my left side. So I needed to find a way to still go to failure on the bicep, still work it as a professional bodybuilder without going too heavy. When you do blood flow restriction training, you literally limit the amount of weight you do, because the lactic acid, the metabolic damage you do, limits the amount of weight you can do, because you simply don't have the oxygen there to replenish the energy in the muscle. And again, it has been proven by literature that it does the same hypertrophy effect. It has the same hypertrophy effect compared to lifting heavy. And of course, that doesn't go for every single exercise, but it does go for isolation ones like this. Okay, now we have a very good pump in the triceps. So this is phase number 1 of the pre-exhaustion. First we simply pumped in a lot of blood, but I'm still keeping them on to keep the pump in there to maximize the effect of the stretch. And the stretch we'll do with the same attachment, the same rope pushdown attachment, but this time we're going to do it overhead. So a rope overhead extension for the triceps for the maximum stretch. So let's do it. So the way I'm actually working out hasn't changed compared to before. So what I'm doing right here is what I normally also do. I always do an isolation first to pump up the triceps, and then I like to do one that is overhead to work the long head to emphasize on the stretch. However, as you know, the better the pump, the better the stretch, a phrase that I like to say quite a lot. That is exponentially true when using these blood flow restriction bands. So what you basically do is you create an even bigger pump to create an even bigger stretch by the weight that you use. So on this overhead exercise, you can actually use, a relatively heavy weight, allowing me to actually stretch those pumped up muscle fibers even more. And the feeling you get is really a satisfying feeling, because normally on some overhead exercises, I find it difficult to feel that stretch in the tricep, which is, I think, one of the reasons why my triceps are a bit lacking compared to the biceps. At least they were before. Now they're pretty much catching up because I've been implementing different kinds of training styles like this. But yes, I really do feel the stretch a whole lot better now, because the blood is being forced to stay in the muscle and it doesn't really get out there by a whole lot, allowing me to feel the stretch a lot more. Now I have to say, and you don't really see this in the video, that I do reduce the tightness of the cuffs every now and then to let a little bit of blood out, because it's used to be meant for only an exercise and not the entire routine. So I let them loose in between exercises to free up the pump just a little bit. Okay, the next one is going to be normally a heavier exercise, but now it's going to be a little lighter because we already pre-exhausted the triceps, creating a maximum pump, swelling up the cells, creating toxins, and actually the toxins during training will cause muscle growth in the end. So now we're going to do an exercise, the Dumbbell Skullcrushers, very good for the long head, because that's what needs to be trained to enhance the tricep size. So let's get started. So it sounds kind of strange. You basically, increase the metabolites, toxins, the oxygen deprivation in the muscles during the workout in order for your body to actually grow muscle. And yes, that's what you do in every single workout. You destroy the muscles. You put them in conditions that your body doesn't want to have them in again the next time. So it will have to improve in muscle size, muscle strength. So next time you'll be able to more easily and more efficiently do the exercise of the same weights. And that's the whole principle of muscle building. And as I said, there are multiple ways to build muscle, not only by lifting heavy, but also by creating an incredible pump, which I already did in the previous two exercises. I also mentioned that any other exercise you do after doing an exercise with a blood flow restriction will be a lot more difficult, because now those cells and those muscle fibers are pretty damaged already, and they are pretty fatigued already, literally because we deprived them of oxygen before. So now these Dumbbell Skullcrushers, which normally would put a lot of pressure on the elbows, are now felt a lot more on the early stages in the triceps compared to before. Normally, for example, you would have to use 30 to 35 kilograms to feel it in the triceps, but then you would also feel it in the joints because of the heavy weight you're using. And now we're using a slightly lighter weight, allowing me to reduce pressure on the joints and the bones and the tendons, and the pressure on the muscle is felt automatically a lot more because we previously exhausted the muscle and damaged the muscle using the blood flow restriction technique. So this video is basically me explaining to you what could be the benefits of training this way and why I've been training this way for a few workouts at least. Okay guys, the last tricep movement is going to be a compound, and I'm placing it at the last movement because a compound uses different muscles, but I don't want the chest or the front delts to be the weak point. I want the triceps to be the limiting factor. So it's going to be a close grip bench press, but not with a regular bar, but actually with a hammer grip. It's better for the wrists, better for the shoulders, and more efficient for training and stretching out the triceps at the bottom. And I'm also going to do not 10 regular reps, but actually 14 reps, 7 low and 7 complete reps. So pretty much 2/3 of the regular 21 reps, where you do 1/3 of a movement 7 times in a row. So let's do it. So to explain it a bit easier, we're simply going to do 7 low reps and then 7 complete reps. Normally you would also do 7 reps at the top, but for me on this particular exercise it would only put more pressure on the elbows, and I believe that I can now have a hybrid between using a relatively heavy weight and actually doing more volume by getting more blood in the muscle. If I would use more weight and then also did the 7 reps at the top, which would be the complete 21 technique, then I think the pressure on the joints would make it, not really an efficient exercise for the muscles. So as you see right here, I did 7 reps at the bottom, and the 7 reps at the bottom, I'm really in my head, in my mind muscle connection, feeling the tension being kept on the tricep at all times. You don't want to lose it. And on the 7 complete reps, it's mostly about explosiveness going up, really making sure you hit those 7 complete range of motion reps. And I'm also doing this, as I mentioned, as the last tricep exercise, because I already did 3 exercises to pre-fatigue and tire out those triceps, so you don't have to use as much weight on a compound like this. Because remember, this is a compound exercise compared to the other 3, which were pretty much all isolation movements, only using the triceps. This compound movement not only uses the triceps, but also the chest, like a bench press, and also the front delts, which would also be used during a bench press. But I do like this grip. It allows me to keep my elbows closer to my body, and that allows me to stretch the triceps better and use less front delts and use less of the chest, and really making those triceps the limiting factor in this movement. Okay, the next one is going to be the start of the biceps. It's going to be a preacher curl, but not with an easy curl bar, but with a straight bar, because a straight bar actually puts more tension on the biceps, a little harder on the wrists, but here you don't have to use a lot of weight because it's a preacher curl with a little more volume. So let's get started and work on the bicep peak. So normally I would use the blood flow restriction cuffs also when I'm training the biceps. One disadvantage though is that it's quite a hassle to put them on correctly, and it takes some time, and sometimes when you're working out, you're in a nice flow, once you have taken them off, you don't want to put them on again. So that's the only real disadvantage. And of course, if you're a person that simply loves to lift heavy, simply loves to beat every single logbook lift, no matter if it's a small muscle group, then it probably wouldn't be something for you, unless you're struggling with a weak muscle group and you already lift very heavy and you simply cannot get it to grow on par with the other muscle groups. Then using that technique will make it exponentially easier to get a pump there, to make it literally in the workout grow by filling it with blood, and it will enhance your mind-muscle connection of the muscle, because the feeling you then get is like it's exploding during the workout. That's how incredible that pump is. But anyway, we are now moving on from the triceps to the biceps. So this is a preacher curl using the straight bar. A lot of people here make the mistake of using a whole lot of weight. And for me, when I'm training a smaller muscle group like the biceps, don't use a whole lot of weight, but mostly really focus on the form, focus on the mind-muscle connection. And yes, some people might not believe in it, but mind-muscle connection will improve the look of a muscle, because then you will know what it feels like to have a peak contraction instead of a regular contraction, and that increases the range of motion because you're then looking for it. Okay, this is going to be a unilateral movement for the biceps. The well-known cable curls, just like you're doing a front double bicep, but this time with only one arm to work on weaknesses, proportional wise. So if your left bicep is smaller than the right one, obviously start out with the left one, and for me that's the case. So let's get started with the left bicep. Now I think this is a very nice exercise to do, especially also when you want to practice posing a little bit. Unfortunately, I cannot do both arms at the same time because this cable machine isn't wide enough, because the weight will be clanging, and that's not what we want. So I'm always using this unilaterally, but even then you can use it as a posing tool to improve your posing, because you always want to feel that specific contraction and tension in the shoulders, keeping the arm straight and pulled back so you are in that pose. And then you can also optimally contract the bicep in the correct plane. Some people like to actually angle their elbow away from the floor, so actually more to the back to make it easier. So then it's kind of like, you know, pulling with your delts and your arm and your bicep at the same time. You want to isolate the bicep here. So if you also look closely, when I'm fully contracting the bicep, the upper arm isn't completely staying still. You can see that if you look at the elbow, it's going up just a little bit, because the full contraction and the full range of motion of the bicep is not with the upper arm being statically still, but when it's actually going up a little bit as well. You can do this when you're doing a barbell curl. You can see that the upper arms, when I do a barbell curl, are also going up at the last portion of the rep. It looks like a cheat rep because, you know, it looks like you're using momentum, but actually you're looking for, again, that peak contraction. And I personally don't feel that peak contraction when I don't use the upper arm to increase that contraction at the very top of the movement. And then you can do this with this exercise, you can do this with a barbell curl or a dumbbell curl, as long as you don't move your whole upper body to use the momentum to lift the weight, then it's fine. You only want to use the upper arm just a little bit. And this exercise is also really great for feeling and enhancing that mind-muscle connection, because you automatically have tension from top to bottom of the full range of motion on the bicep the entire time, so you get a very nice stretch and a very nice contraction, and that's what you want when you're training a muscle. So some people find it difficult to work the biceps without feeling the forearms, and this exercise is really easy on the forearms. It's just a rolling grip I'm using right here. Nothing hard about using this. It's also one arm at a time, so the weight is less as well. So definitely one you should do for your bicep training every once in a while. Okay guys, the last one is going to be a hammer variation of the curl. So we only did 2 bicep curls for the bicep peak, so the amount the bicep goes up, but the hammer curls works the bicep thickness, so the amount the bicep goes to the outside, so literally thickness from the front. That's where you work the brachialis muscle, or the muscle that goes beneath the biceps, making it more broad basically, and that's what the hammer curls do. And also the top of the forearm, the Phil Heath forearm muscles, you can train using the hammer curl. So let's finish off the biceps with those. Now as you can see, I'm only using one arm at a time, and I'm not alternating between the arms. I personally like this because then you can get the tension on your bicep the whole time. If you use an alternating hammer curl or dumbbell curl, then you lose the tension when the other arm is performing the curl. The other arm is then lost in tension because it's simply hanging to the side of your body. So to me, to keep the tension alive, to keep the time under tension complete without interruption, using one arm and finishing that arm before starting with the other arm is the best way to go. It also, and it might be, you know, a disadvantage for some people, it lowers the amount of weight you're able to do, because not only are you doing constant tension work, It's also not providing you with a break in between every rep. So without that break and with the constant tension on the bicep, of course the weight you're able to use is going to be less. So keep in mind when you're changing the alternating hammer curls with this one that you should think about at least, using half of the weight to start with and then maybe increasing on the last set just to see how much weight you're able to do using this technique. But yes, I do really recommend this exercise if your bicep thickness is lacking and also if the top of your forearm is lacking in mass, because this exercise turns both into more massive muscles. Alright guys, that was the arm workout. First the triceps, then the biceps, because the triceps are 2/3 of the arm size of your upper arm, so always work them first, especially if you want bigger arms overall. So this was a simple yet advanced workout, so different kind of exercises for you to try out. And if you have any questions, ask them down below and I'll include them in the next Q&A. I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to stay golden.